Coming up next on Get Caught in a Net.
You are now tuned in to Mind, Body, and Soul with Anet, where your host, Anet Harris, analyze intriguing life questions and concerns, such as, do Christians suffer from mental illness? Have you wondered why they act abnormal? Or you may ask, what is really going on in their minds? Do you need Anet? Well, keep listening for a biblical understanding of the psychology of the mind.
Hey guys, welcome to another wonderful segment of Mind, Body, and Soul with Anet. I'm your girl, your host, Anet Harris. I am also your certified mental health ambassador and author of that award-winning bestseller, Surviving a Silenced Heartbeat. Listen, guys, I always tell you, if you see my face at 12 noon Central Standard Time on a Wednesday, it is time for you to come on in and get caught in a net. And I am so excited about today, Wednesday, August 21st, because as you've seen in my post, we are going to do a 2-for-1 on today. We are highlighting arts and books on today. And I have two wonderful women that I have met and have known for a period of time that we want to highlight what they're doing. I think someone said this is the time for women for us to stand up and do our thing and to be noticed. And so we're going to do a little highlighting on today. So I'm excited to bring in my first guest. But before I do, I always like to pray. Lord, we thank you for all things. We thank you for who you are, how you are. We thank you for what you've done, the doors you're opening, the ways that you're making. And we ask that you would get the glory out of this segment and everything we go to say and do. In Jesus' name we pray. And the first part of Hosea 4:6 states, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee. And again, we're excited to be here on this afternoon. It's always good to bring you great quality programming and discuss what's going on in and around us. So I'm going to ask you to do me a huge favor. I'm going to ask you to share. Like, share, love, share, throw up the thumbs up if you would not mind for me. And you know what? You can tag individuals directly into this particular live feed. We are live on my Facebook page, Anet Get Caught in the Net. Also on Instagram, Get Caught in the Net, and on YouTube, Get Caught in the Net. So there are 3 different ways you can listen to us live. At the end of this segment, what we're going to do is to have this particular segment and the one later on to be uploaded to our Intellectual Radio's website. That is where Mind, Body, and Soul is housed, and that's where you can listen to us. Some are able to listen to us live. Some of you are working, I get it, and you have to come back a little bit later and listen to the broadcast. You have all the tools that you can do that with. So I encourage you to do so on today. So I'm going to bring in this lovely guest of mine, and I'm going to read a little bit of her bio once I bring her in. I have with us on today, Mary Porterfield. She is... oh my goodness. Let me tell you a little bit about this young lady. Mary, how are you doing today, first and foremost?
I am very well, and I'm so incredibly happy to be here. So I'm great. Thank you.
Good. I'm so happy you're here with us on today. We finally got it, Mary. We have been trying to get a date where we can have you to come on. You have a busy schedule, and you guys are going to understand and hear why on today, but we got her. We got her today. So let me read a little bit of her bio that she sent me. It says Mary Porterfield's work. Let me put my glasses back on, guys, because, that helps me. Her work is influenced by her work as occupational therapist and her interaction with patients and their caregivers, including her mother's role as caregiver for her disabled father. In painting on semi-transparent papers, she progressively layers her images, and this is the work we're talking about, to address the reoccurring struggles in healthcare that are outwardly hidden. She has exhibited both nationally and internationally at venues including the Lim Limp Museum in South Korea, the Phoenix Art Museum, San Diego Art Institute, the Hyde Park Art Center, oh my goodness, the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, the Kohler Art Center, Dubuque Art Museum, Freeport Art Museum, Fig, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Art Museum, Rockford Art Museum, Weatherspoon Art Museum, and the Ukrainian Institute of Modern Art. Her solo shows have included the Hofheimer Gallery in Chicago, Illinois, the Packer Schaff Gallery in Chicago, Illinois, Indiana University in Gary, Indiana, the Epiphany Art Center in Chicago, Illinois, the University of Illinois, Urbana, Illinois, and the West Valley Art Museum in Surprise, Arizona. Never heard of that city. Okay. Honors include 3 Illinois Artists Council grants, a City of Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs grant, a Puffin Foundation grant, and 3 Chicago Community Arts Assistant Program grants. Now, it says she teaches at Northeastern Illinois University and she received an MFA. Is that correct? From
Yes.
Arizona State University.
Yes.
Okay, before I go further, what's an MFA?
Master's in Fine Arts.
Okay, okay. All right, all right, all right. All right, so you know what? I am so excited to have her. Mary and I met, actually, it's been 2 years in October. When my book first came out, I had a booth at DuSable Museum for their drum book fair. And we were talking with different ones, showcasing my book. And Mary stopped by my booth. And I am so glad that she did. She's so easy to talk to. So I'm going to, let her talk on today. But she's so easy to talk to. And we just got to talking about our own personal journey and our own personal experience and how it related to art and how it related to my book. And so that's how we made our acquaintance. And that's why you have Mary here on today with us. So knowing that she is an artist, a wonderful artist, and you guys have to see her work, I wanted to highlight her on today. And so when we met, let's chat a little bit about that meetup. When you and I met, we talked a length of time, as I already stated, about your own personal journey with your parents and how that connected to the theme of my book. You want to kind of give us a little background or if you want to address how you and I met?
Yeah, I walked by your booth and the title caught my eye, Surviving a Silenced Heartbeat. And my father had died about a year prior. And I thought, oh gosh, I think this might be a book that my mom might really love because she was struggling with grief and is still struggling. And I bought her the book as a Christmas present and she loved it because she was really consoled by your words and also not feeling she was alone in the struggle with grief and how you coped with your tragedy of the loss of your brother. So it was a beautiful thing. And then talking with you, you radiated so much warmth, in that conversation. And I knew someone that was that warm and inviting likely would have beautiful words to match. And so I'm very grateful for the purchase and my mom loved it. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. But like I said, you were definitely easy to talk to. It was a good connection,
Yes,
and I'm grateful that it was made. So yeah, and you were mentioning about your mom, and my heart just kind of went out to her as you were talking about her. So I know I read your bio. Just a little bit, maybe something you want to share with us about your personal background a little bit further, is in case I missed anything.
Yeah, well, I initially went into occupational therapy because I never believed I could make money as an artist. But I did, of course, want to help people. And I think in occupational therapy, there are outlets for creativity. You have to help patients problem solve ways to be safe at home, and you have to come up with sometimes creative solutions so they're not at risk for falling and they can do their activities of daily living. So that's what drew me to the profession. And I was working full time 5 years at St. Louis University Hospital. And I kept taking night classes at the community college because even though I didn't major in art, I loved it. And I happened to have a teacher who was a nurse by day, and she went on to teach at a community college at night. And she explained that while working, she went on to get her master's in fine arts from Washington University in St. Louis. When I was living in St. Louis at the time, and that's where I had gone for occupational therapy school. And I thought, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And I kept taking classes at the community college, and I had one really great teacher in particular, and he's like, if you're serious, you apply to 10 graduate schools and you hope to God one takes you. And I did, and I was lucky enough, Arizona State accepted me, and so I moved there, and I believe it was the fall of 99. And I kept having these two worlds. I worked weekends at some of the hospitals in Phoenix to put myself through school. And then the weekdays, I was a graduate student in fine arts, and I got to devote my time to painting. And then upon graduating ASU in 2002, I really had my dream life for a while. I work 3 days a week at Northeastern. I still teach. And then 2 days a week, I'm sorry, I teach 2 days a week at Northeastern, but I work 3 days a week at Resurrection Hospital in Chicago. So I had this divided life, but I'm still grateful for the occupational therapy because it gave me the funds to support my artwork, and it gave me the stability to make art, because it can be a scary business if you're relying on art to pay your rent and health insurance and other things. So that's more or less my path. That's sort of beneath the bio, so to speak.
Wow. And what a path to have that, connects so easily.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing. Wow, I didn't know that you were really focused on the art. I thought the art came after.
I
But that,
always loved it. I just never realized I could make a living from it. And I had a lot of painting classes as an undergrad, but I just felt my mom told me, and I think she was right. It would be a very difficult road if I decided to be an artist and relied on that to pay my bills. And so I went into occupational therapy, but I'm really also grateful because working in occupational therapy and working many times with elder individuals, I've grown to be really inspired by their situations. I've gotten to meet many caregivers. It's really inspired my artwork. It's gotten me to think about things and end of life situations that I might or not ordinarily be aware of. And I've also worked with many individuals that have had dementia, which my father also struggled with. And it's
oh,
sad also when you see patients, you might work with them and then they're readmitted a year or two later, and you can see the shift in their cognition, and you can see that they gradually become ghost of the person you remembered, as was my father's case. So initially, my artwork was largely inspired by what I saw at the hospital. And then my father's life seemed to mirror a lot of the situations I saw at work in the hospital, where patients gradually became less and less of themselves and more dependent on other people for their activities of daily living.
mm, wow. That's deep. And obviously your heart goes out to that. And then, like you said, you experienced it personally
Yes.
with your dad. Wow, that's amazing. So you've already answered how you kind of got started in the arts because that was your passion. And
Mhm.
that's good because sometimes that'll help us to, as we're going through life, trying to figure out what we're
Mhm.
doing.
Mhm.
We have to look at what ignites us. And
Yes.
like you said, that was your passion. You just, as far as the finance part
Yeah.
of it, you were trying to make sure that that would, suffice and be
Yeah.
able to take care of you.
Yes.
So how can works of art be influenced by life in general? What would you say to that?
I think the best works are like there's an artist named Kathy Kollwitz, and if memory serves me correctly, I believe her son died in World War One. Her grandson died in World War Two, and she does the most heart-wrenching works of loss and a mother's loss. And I think anyone going through any type of grief, your experiences and my own, anyone, I think could look at these images and feel the love and the loss of love, but the love that continues. So I think the most powerful works are based and many times based on personal experiences. And one of my favorite quotes is that the more personal you make something, the more universal it becomes. It's not. It was told to me when I was a grad student by Deborah Hopkins. She was a curator at the Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art, and I was told that quote in 2002, and it's really carried my work onward all these years. That's really my mantra. And I look at so many great artists like Kara Walker, Trent Doyle Hancock. I could even say Van Gogh also. And these deeply personal works become so heartfelt because the artist was really painting or expressing their lived experience. And when you sense that honesty, I think it can really move someone, as
Yeah.
in the book. So thank you for asking that.
Yeah, for sure. Because, I definitely see a connection. I see a connection in how, I'm not an artist, like you are, or any of the names that you've already given, but I can just maybe kind of and imagine you can sit down and kind of just like, however you're doing your artistry, take your time. Maybe, it'll kind of ignite some things mentally for you.
Mhm.
You can relate it back to certain things, but it almost seems like it's kind of a, I don't know. I'm sure you probably get a lot of comfort, or as you're creating your works of art, calmness, maybe.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it
Mhm.
just, it kind of seems like that's what it would bring out, for me. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think as you're doing it, you get lost in the moment. So I think there's sort of an ebb and a flow where you're thinking of your topic you're expressing, and then you get lost in how to communicate it. And when you get lost, you're freed of the pain, so to speak. And then you're thinking again about what brought you to the topic, and it sort of comes and goes, the thoughts you have and how you approach it. But I do think art can be really a gift to help you get through difficult times. And I feel when I do my art too, I'm really, I want to believe I'm giving support and I'm allowing caregivers to be seen, and many are unseen, and many are doing unpaid care for a loved one. I have some statistics here, but 15.7 million people care for someone with dementia. We don't see these 15.7 million people. A lot of that care is unpaid. A lot of care comes from family members. So when I'm doing my art, I think it's not just that I get lost in it, but I get pride in the sense then when the work is completed, I'm doing something that allows these individuals, it's represented by my mother, but I hope to represent the vast number of caregivers and allowing them to be seen. So that also drives me, and that also gives me a sense of um, hope and joy, I guess,
Yeah.
from a hard experience when the work is done.
Wow. That's amazing.
Mhm.
That's amazing because again, you can, lose yourself in it,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah. Oh, wow. That's beautiful. So now let me ask you, this is not, I know I have, certain questions that I want to ask you on today, but let me just ask you this real quick. Maybe can kind of, and as you're talking, I'm going to try and pull up some of your images that you've
Okay.
shared with me, if you
Mhm.
don't mind,
Sure.
so that others can see it as well. You are, okay. So in your bio, it says you're a is it portraitist? Can I?
Yes, I do tend to focus on the figure quite a bit. That's shifted a little bit recently, but I've always loved the figure. And I have to say, part of that gets back to occupational therapy, because when you're trained to be an occupational therapist, it's 1 year of anatomy, and it's not just memorizing, facts out of a book. We were given cadavers, and so we had to. When we were tested, they would put little flags on all the muscles, and then we had to go around to each cadaver and identify what muscle did what nerve did what, and to me anatomy became such a visceral thing that I experienced. And then going into work as an occupational therapist and having to know the muscles and how with certain muscles being affected, say by a stroke or a disability, how that affects your function. So anatomy and the structure of it and how it implicates function was always on my mind. So I've always had a real desire to express the figure. and
Mhm.
and so that is true about also doing portraits too, understanding the musculature that creates the emotion and the facial expressions.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to see if I can. Here's one. Um, and you had this titled "A Window Long Since Removed."
Yes. Yes, that's a title of that came from a poem
Okay.
And it really, I was thinking so much about my mother's experience caring for my father during the pandemic, and she couldn't leave the house much because of the pandemic, let alone my father's disability. So I was imagining what it would be like to be homebound with your loved one, and they've got a patio door. It's to my left here now. We're looking outside and seeing your garden, but not being really able to leave your loved one for long periods of time because my dad was so disabled and needed so much help, like help to feed himself, bathe himself, dress himself, and toileting. So to be really confined to a room and having nature be outside that room was a topic that was really moving to me, that I wanted to express. So the flowers are transparent because the flowers are alive in her garden, to me almost were like ghosts, because she couldn't access them. She can only look at them from afar.
That is so deep, Mary. That is
Oh.
deep.
One thing that helped me a lot somewhere along the line, it was actually wasn't terribly long ago, it might have been 10 to 15 years ago, a curator said to me, let your medium support your artwork. And so I'm talking about the topics of dementia, my father's loss from who he was, but my mother's loss also, because her identity became lost in caring for him. And both of their experiences not being able to access what they previously had access to because of my father's disability. So all of this is about loss and disappearance. So for me, working on these semi-transparent films was a way to represent that. The flowers are no longer have the opaque substance that they would have in painting them in an ordinary fashion. I'm trying to show their disappearance as I'm trying to show my mother's disappearance of her own identity and being consumed by the act of caregiving. So that's one thing. If there's any young artists watching, I would say, think about how the medium and think about what you're choosing to communicate your thoughts with. That can add another element of power to your work.
Whoa. Yeah, they're commenting on her. They said this is really deep. It really is. And when you submitted, a number of your images of your work, I was just like taken aback. I was like, wow, because it, makes you look and look and look again. But I'm glad, and I'm pointing on the over this way because this is where my screen is. How you just described it with the flowers and the fading of the flowers, and then you have the image like right in the middle of that, and like you said, you're trying to you were trying to bring out what it was that your mom was actually dealing with herself and getting lost in trying to tend to and take care of your father. That is so amazing. And I'm sure, how did this help you? We just talk about this particular one right here. I know go ahead.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think I'm still finding the answer out, but I will say it did give me joy to know that in this image and others, I gave my mom validity, like I honored her. So
Yeah.
that gave me some peace, because during the pandemic, I couldn't get home because I was working at a hospital. Like many healthcare workers, there were constant exposures. We were often not told of these exposures. So for 1 year, I could not get home, living in Chicago, and I'd call my mom and I'd hear about her day through her tears. It was very, very difficult to hear about her experiences and not being able to be near her or help in any way. So at least through these images, I can let her story live on. And I hope that it might serve as a point of connection to other caregivers, or maybe just to know that other individuals that are going through similar things aren't facing it alone. 1 in 5 individuals is a caregiver, and those numbers are not supported on the news. It saddens me greatly that this is such an important topic that is not given the attention it deserves. But at least when I make my art, I feel I'm an advocate for these individuals that I so greatly admire, and that has helped me.
Beautiful, beautiful. Oh, I love it. Great explanation. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing this particular one. We're going to pull up some more eventually. But this is you've got something here. And I'm sure you know that. Many of you that just now come in, you probably did not get a chance to hear as I was introducing my guest on today, but we are talking with Mary Porterfield, and she's occupational therapist by trade, but she is also a portraitist, an artist, and she had her work has been featured internationally, nationally, all over the world, and you can see why. Just looking at that one particular image that she shared with us, it just lets you know that we can take our skill and our abilities and our talents, and create something out of it. And that's exactly what she did, and she had a reason for doing it. Motivation. It helped her and also helped her family as well, and then those who are viewing her work. I'm quite sure it helped them as well. So let me ask you this. So you wear a lot of hats, and we've already talked about family
Mm-hmm.
being very important to you, number one priority. So what is most important? I mean, you already kind of said it, as you've been talking. What's most important to you out of all the hats that you wear? What's most important that you actually do and succeed at?
Right now it's just being a good daughter to my mother, because she has cancer in her colon, kidney, and now liver. And so I'm spending a lot of time with her this summer, and I'll be traveling back and forth as I teach to be with her virtually every weekend and more. So I just want to be there for her as she was for my father. And that does pose some predicaments too with making art. But I think when you're an artist, you always find a way. And so what I've done, my art has shifted since I've been home with my mother so much. So I can't make the big 17-foot long works I was making in Chicago, but I sit at the edge of her countertop, and I work when I can. And that still has been good, because you find a way to match your situation when it's really burning within you. And even this summer, what I've done is I've been sculpting my father's handkerchiefs. And so I
Oh,
bought sculpting medium, and I've really been struck by the topic, by the whole idea that when a loved one passes, and I don't know if you may have done this with your brother, certain things you hold precious that you never
yes.
want to throw away. Like, I was talking to another artist at the Bemis Art Center, and her husband had passed, and she's like,
Mm,
when I see his tie clips or when I see his tweezers, like, there's certain things that they may seem so insignificant to other people, but to you they're items that touched your loved one, and they become so meaningful upon their passing. So I've been thinking a lot about that, and maybe I don't have the wall space to make those works. Even on my mom's countertop, I'm finding a way to do works such as this, and I've sculpted 100 of them. And if I,
wow.
as I apply for other shows, there's a way with Velcro I can attach them to the wall, and hopefully I can have them displayed in a a beautiful venue, is my hoping. And I'm also thinking too about how my mom has still saved all of my dad's clothing. And I
Mm.
was talking to her about, I'm like, would I have your permission to take certain clothes, not all of them, of course, but just a few, or his ties, and do something similar, and paint, create by bits and pieces a giant collage on the wall, because these were things that touched him, that reminded her of him. And when someone's gone, these things that seem insignificant to others become elevated to you. They become precious, and make that into an artwork. So my work has shifted since this change of being with my mom so much. But for any artist listening, I think you always find a way if it's within you. And
Yeah.
along these lines, there's an artist named Chuck Close, and for those of you really into the painting world, he became paralyzed from
Mm.
the neck down. I believe it was from an aneurysm in his spinal cord, and he wasn't entirely paralyzed, but largely lost use of his legs and hands. And I heard him interviewed on NPR, and he's like, they were asking about his disability, and he's like, you just, more or less, you find a way to do it. And that's what I'm doing now. And it's been a good thing, because I think if I do too much of what I had done before, that can be monotonous. I don't want to keep doing the same thing. So this change just forced me into thinking of other ways to communicate loss and grief, and how to do that in a way that's deeper and hopefully even more honest than what I was doing previously.
Right. Wow. I'm just over here smiling, Mary, because I'm just so impressed.
Oh,
I
thank
just love
you.
it. I just
Thank
absolutely
you.
love it. Here's an individual that, really is serious about her work and relating it to what it is she's dealing with that again can help someone else. But thank you for answering that question. That was great. What I want to do is to maybe kind of go through some of these other images, if you want to maybe kind of
Sure.
describe
Sure.
them to us and what your thought pattern was as you
Mhm.
were actually creating the artwork. Now, before I do that, are what's like maybe kind of a time frame? How long does it take you to create? And I'm sure it depends upon what you're
Mhm.
creating, but
Yeah.
kind of on a whole, what's like your maybe timeline that you do?
Yeah, this is a very general statement, but the larger the work usually takes me more time. Like I believe there's one you're going to show that's 17 feet long, and there's another one that's probably like 100 inches high. I think those took around a year. And the figures I make are life size because if I'm going to support the topic of caregiving, I want the caregivers to be seen. They are unseen in so many situations. They are going to be seen on the walls where I exhibit. So they're life size figures. And so painting each figure probably takes a few days, maybe 3 or 4 days. And then as you can see, I compile many on top of each other. And the layering, as I was saying previously, is a way of showing that their loss of identity, whether it's the loss of a caregiver because of the consumption of what she's doing, or the loss of a loved one who might be progressively lost because of dementia. So as the figures become more obscured, I hope to support my topic further.
Okay, okay. Oh, I love it. So, those of you that are watching and maybe you want to encourage someone else, I would encourage you to tag a caregiver. Mary said earlier she doesn't have the exact stats, but at least one, or they're not really shown, at least 1 in 5 are caregivers.
Hmm.
And so Mary takes her work and she, focuses it toward those that are going through because truth be told, and it is so accurate that caregivers are not um they're not looked at, they're not taken care of, they're overlooked. They're doing so much for the individual that they're taking care of, that no one else really kind of looks at it and helps them. So I think this is just absolutely wonderful that you take your abilities and you do it for them. So let's go here. Let me make sure that we can share this. Here is another one. Um, and I'm trying to see. Okay, so you guys should be able to see this one. It says 5 years adrift. Is that accurate?
Yes, my dad struggled from Parkinsonism, Alzheimer's, and several strokes, and they believe the Parkinsonism was due to Orange exposure in Vietnam. But he suffered greatly, and it really was a 5 year long journey that he progressively declined. And so I wanted to show that based on the layering of this image, and I've displayed this in different ways at the Epiphany Center for the Arts. The image was hung low on the wall, and then it was if the weight of the wall was on my father's back, as because I'm sure on some level he probably felt his disappearance. And then this image is from the Miller Art Museum in Sturgeon Bay, and the curator brought the work away from the wall by cutting off foam core. And I also like this way too, because you can see the echoes of transparency where she had foam, where she put foam core on the back. You see that whiteness behind the figures, and then where there isn't foam core, you see the transparency of the wall behind, and you
Okay.
see how the shadows create other echoes of his being. And I like this also because with the additional layers brought through the shadows and brought through how it's hung, you can also see his shift from the person my mom and I remembered from the person he was near the time of his passing. He became less and less of the person we remembered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. This is so amazing. This is just amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, let's go on to the next one. Oh my goodness. And you guys, we're gonna let her tell us, of course, before we end, where you can find her find her artwork, and see the places that it has been displayed. And I'm not sure, I'm sure, are there places where it's still being displayed?
Not at this moment, but
Okay.
I will be in a show at the Garrett Museum of Art opening October 4th called Women Take the Walls. And then it's going to be at Alma Interiors, I believe, opening early November in Chicago. And I'll have 5 pieces there of windows that I've made along the lines of what I was discussing earlier, that in my parents' world, windows really became their only access to the outside world, because they couldn't leave because of his disability. They were so homebound. And so the windows I painted are opaque, and the flowers become decorative because they didn't have access to their actual garden. So those I'm going to have 4 windows displayed then at Alma Interiors, and those can be seen in Chicago.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, you guys can take a look at what we have here. This one is called Installation View, right? Is that right? Okay.
I believe the title was The Tides Within, but it is an installation view,
Okay.
because this image is basically 17 feet long, and it's basically it was shot by photography within the gallery. And this was at Wabansie Community College, and then it was seen later at the Riverside Art Center. And
Okay.
it's really about caregiving. It's about just these figures climbing over each other. There's moments, if you look closely, where my mom is lovingly embracing my father, other moments where she's trying to pull him forward, other moments where she's turning away, and other moments where she expresses love. Because I think caregiving is full of a multitude of emotions. There's moments where the love is so intensely expressed, but there's also moments where it can be very, very exhausting, and
Mhm.
you don't get that relief. And especially in a time like the pandemic, my mom didn't have the help. So I have this long image, and I hope to keep working on it. Actually, I called it The Tides Within because I want to have it morph into a giant wave. So you see the bottom part of the wave, but I'm going to add to it even further to create more of a crest. And as the wave merges into a crest, and you currently see the trough, the figures are going to become more abstracted, more fragmented, more intertwined. Because I believe as caregiving goes on, and as the person you're caring for becomes more and more dependent, your lives can become so entwined, and that loss of identity of the caregiver is intensified, and the dependence of the person being cared for is also intensified, to the point that they're literally merged. And I think the identity of both can be so hard to see. So I plan to continue working on this one. I hope during the school year. And I work, the edge of my mom's countertop, and I'll be able to paint one figure at a time. And I may end up taking it out to her garage and laying it out and trying to figure out the placement. But this will get done. My hope is, in the next few months, I'll have it finished.
What else are you going to add? This is so amazing.
Oh, thank you. I just want to make it look more like a wave. Like I think the
Oh.
intertwined aspects, and as the wave reaches its crest and about to crash down onto the trough, I think that can be such a powerful symbol for end of life circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Wow. That is so amazing. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me see. I have another one here. Let me see if I can fit this on the screen. Uh, this is, support that remains. Is that
Yeah.
accurate?
Yes, I bought used walkers from Amazon, and I spray painted them white, and I put them in this pile. And it gets back to, I think so much about everything that's left behind when a loved one passes. And when you're caring for someone with a disability, there's so much that remains: the walkers, the wheelchairs, the commodes, the tub benches, the sit to stand devices. I could go on and on and on. And these are the devices that remain when the loved one is no longer there. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wanted to just magnify that sense of this empty home where you're surrounded by these devices, and you just have to rely on the soul of the individual being there with you because they're no longer present. So I'm proud of this one because it was a direction I hadn't gone in. I'd never done sculptures before, but I've always loved lines, and I love the crisscrossing of the lines that the walkers have made. So,
Yeah.
and yes, so I may add on to this one too. Actually, it's I think it's about 90, 100 inches high. I'd love to go even bigger, but
Hmm.
but maybe in the future. So.
Wow. Yeah, when I first saw that, I was like, those are walkers and crutches and
Yep, yep, you got it. You got it.
oh my goodness. Okay, this one is entitled Longing. Is that right?
Yes, I was thinking, when I this piece really took a lot of different directions. I initially hoped to have I imagined ropes going from the mattress to the figure, and how my mom's always connected to my father, who in my mind this represented a hospital bed. So I that's originally how I had it planned, but then it didn't work in the gallery because the rope didn't connect with those two different elements. So I decided to leave the rope out, and I lowered the figure so that by lowering her, she connected more closely with the mattress. And so the flowers represent my father in a deceased manner, and then I have an echoing of the flowers for the figure on the wall that's climbing forward, but yet the memories of my father always with her. Those were the thoughts I had had, and um, yeah, this was also a new direction for me. I like the idea of installations because then the viewer can walk up and walk around the piece and really be more active with it versus just looking at it on a wall. So I'm excited by these new developments, and I'd love to work more in this fashion where the viewer's invited, to walk around and be a part of it.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right, we're going to move on because you know what? I'm going to keep saying this is amazing because it is. It is. Give and take. I believe that's the name of this one.
Yes,
Give and
yes.
take. I see the hands, I see the fingers in
Yeah,
here.
yeah. When I did this one, I was actually thinking of a wedding bouquet and how seriously my mother took her vows. And then also thinking of my father near the end as he had dementia, where all he could do was take because the dementia affected his ability to express thanks or to give, and so and then you think, okay, my mother's in a situation where she's constantly giving, and this is near the end of his life, probably the last 6 months, and he's taking from what she's giving, but yet there's a real beauty to that. I mean, it's very difficult and it's hard, but not many people have the inner strength to do that. So that's why I added the flowers. To me, the flowers symbolize the beauty of unconditional love, the beauty of trying to give selflessly to someone else. And there's other issues that arise. You think about balance, and you think about, is this always safe for the caregiver? But I did want to do a piece that really showed what I admire about caregiving.
Hmm. Hmm. So before I move to the next one, how do you come up with these ideas?
I just obsess, I just think and think. And, when you get lost in your artwork, I don't know if you're entirely lost, but your mind wanders. You're thinking about the topic, and then it leads you to different offshoots. And I keep going back to, how can I present this topic more honestly? How can I present this topic in the most open ended way possible? Because I don't want to isolate individuals from looking at my work. And I think that's also why maybe I've shifted a little bit away from the figure, like with the handkerchiefs and the walkers, because looking at those images, it by taking the figure out, anyone could relate to the work. And so I'm
Mhm.
going a little bit more those directions, but I keep asking myself, how can you make this more relatable and more general so that it can be open to anyone's personal interpretation?
But I still think you have something here, though. Because a lot of times people will be able to relate to you better when you share your own personal journey.
Yeah, that's
As we've
true.
already talked.
That's true. Yeah.
And so when they see, because I'm just, me myself just looking at this, and I'm sure those who have seen your art, I don't think that they, because you were chronicling, if you will, or focusing on your parents and their love, their marriage, her caregiving and taking care of your father, that they couldn't relate. I'm sure that they could still relate. You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
mean, and I get it. I'm not an artist. I'm not in your head, and I get you're probably trying to, make sure it's like more general than anything. But I mean, I still think you have something with this being more specific. Um, and specializing in what you've dealt with, because somebody else again can look at it and say, you know what, this is helping me to get through because I can relate it back to me.
Yeah.
um, and I know everybody don't think like I do, but that's how I
Mhm.
think. That's exactly how I think, because I'm like, okay, I'm always placing myself in
Mhm.
what I'm seeing here and kind of seeing how it can relate back to me. That's just me.
Mhm.
um but yeah, this is amazing. So do you like take maybe notes or something and say, okay, this is what I'm going to focus on next? Say for instance, this one is called From This Day Forward, right? So do you like
Mhm.
write down maybe titles or topics of what you want to create and then create from there? How does it come about?
I think more generally of the topic, and then I used to take notes. I don't really anymore, but I think of the topic of how can I show that the weight is often on the woman, because most caregivers are women. How can I express that, and how can I also show the loss of identity that someone being cared for, caring experiences? And I keep asking these questions, and then as I keep obsessing on these questions, it leads to the idea of another work. Um, and then in terms of what I'm going to work on, all these pieces had been in my living room. My living room was my art studio in Chicago. So I constantly look at them. So when I'd walk in my studio, just looking at it told me what I needed to do, because certain parts would just eat at me that if it wasn't balanced, or there's a trick in art where if you flip the work upside down or sideways, a good artwork should look good at any angle. So I would
Okay.
take photos of my work and I would flip it on its side, and I knew if it was off, that's what I should work on. So that would kind of be guiding what I wanted to do next. And sometimes what I worked on next was dependent on shows. If there's a deadline that I had to get this work in, or an exhibition I wanted to apply for, I worked on the works where I could achieve that goal. If it's something that took a year, that would be pushed aside, and I'd work on the more immediate exhibition opportunities with smaller pieces. So kind of a mix of a lot of things, but I don't generally take notes anymore. I just think about this general topic of caregiving and how can I support it. How can I just let caregivers be seen?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And then
So
all these ideas just flow out.
yeah, you just obsess long enough, and the ideas will hit you in the shower, in the car, or a lot of times if I go to a museum or art gallery and I look at other people's works, there's something about just being in that silent place, and I'm thinking about art, and it'll trigger an idea from my own. This Museums can be kind of magical that way,
Yeah.
or art galleries. So I guess because I'm surrounded by my element and what I love, that tends to trigger some ideas.
Right. Beautiful. Okay, if you can describe this one to me, to us, From This Day Forward.
I was just thinking about, especially during the pandemic and I couldn't get home, how my mother had to lift my father onto the commode. And as he declined, it got to be almost total weight. And my mom's 5 feet tall. I don't know how she did it. My dad's 5'8". I don't know how she lifted him, but it was just sheer love. And I just really wanted to express that because the weight got heavier as time went on, as he was, he had several strokes shortly before he died, and he wasn't able to help, and it was truly on her, and getting him out of the bed in the morning, and those were the days you couldn't have caregivers, you couldn't have hired help because
Mhm.
there wasn't a vaccine. So just to know how she lifted my father, I'm still in awe of it, and I just wanted to show her physical and emotional strength in this image.
Wow. And you did just that.
Oh, thank
You did
you.
just
Thank
that. I see
you.
her at the bottom, and this is just amazing. You guys are gonna need to make sure that you follow my friend here, Mary. There are so many more images that I could show you guys. Um, And now you let me know if there was, before we end on today, if there was an image that you really wanted me to show, or you did, want to focus on. Okay. But there's just so much, here. And I'm just so equally impressed, again, how you have set your own um, needs aside to highlight this. Like you said, you wanted to make sure that you highlight caregivers and what they are or are not getting, and what they're focused on. I can only imagine, like you said, you couldn't figure out how your mom
I
did what she did.
yeah.
And yeah, we were in the throes of the
Mhm,
pandemic
mhm.
when that happened. So I know one of my other questions that I had for you was, how was your work and your mission affected during the pandemic? And I think you kind of answered that for us. And I'm sure your heart was probably going out. You probably really, really wanted to be home to help your mom. Is there something else you wanted to add to that, like during the pandemic, that you faced?
Well, I think you asked a really great question early on about the different hats, and I think the priority. I'm so sorry, my my earbud little my earphone popped out.
Okay.
Um, but you asked such a great question about the different hats that people wear. And I think for me, the pandemic made my mom the priority in my life. Nothing matters. The shows, the awards, nothing matters if you don't have your mother. So I think that just totally changed my way of thinking. And I mentioned earlier I'm going to be in the show at the Garrett Museum of Art, and we were all asked to make a video of us working in our studios. And I was reluctant to make the video because here I am with my mother in Nebraska and working on her countertop. And I thought, oh, if I make it, all these other artists are going to be these beautiful spaces. I'm going to feel embarrassed. But I thought, no, I'm going to make this video because that is the reality of what caregivers face.
Yeah, it
So I
is.
just wanted to show that you find a way, and you still carry your passion with you, but you just have your priorities on your loved one at the time.
Beautiful. And then they're able to see, like you said, this is my space. This is where I create,
Yes, yes,
so,
yes,
there's nothing for you to be ashamed of. And others
yes.
are probably thinking, some other artists are probably thinking the same thing. But if that's where you create, that's where you create,
Yep,
you
yep,
know?
exactly.
So you do just that. Now, before we end on today, speaking of the where you're going to present next, or have your work in next, how did because I read off a list of museums and art centers and universities that your work has been displayed. How did it get started? Did you start with one and
Hmm.
maybe others, they found out about your work? Was it word of mouth? How were you able to get it into all these places nationally and internationally?
That's an excellent question. I would wish some of my students would be here listening to this, but I would start off, and you get in the arts, you get notices of juried shows. Some are competitive, some aren't, and I would enter a lot of juried shows, and then I would go, I'd meet the juror, meet other artists, and then your network grows, and then sooner or later it is a little bit word of mouth. For me lately, it's mostly word of mouth, but previously it was just getting into a group show, going and networking, and then the group show would lead to a connection. The connection might lead to a two-person show, that led to a connection, that lead to a solo show. And then in the arts too, there's a saying, you throw enough mud on the wall, something's going to stick. So you do a lot of things. You do the shows, but applying for grants in the past has been helpful, because even if you don't get the grant, you're exposing your work to valid jurors that now are aware of the work you do. Getting those proposals out, they see you.
Mhm.
So it's been a long journey, probably more or less. I started in 94, but I hope that answered your question.
It
That's how
did.
things led to where they are.
It did. That's beautiful. 94. Wow.
Yeah, 94.
Man, Mary, that's a long
I
time.
know it's a long time. Behind me, like I have a lot of my stuff here now in Nebraska with my mom. You should see all the artworks that are propped in her family room. It's the same family room where she cared for my father. She slept on the sofa. He was in the
Oh,
hospital bed, and now all my artworks are across in this bin. But yeah, it's been, yeah, pretty much a 30-year long journey. So but a
Beautiful.
wonderful journey. Like I look back and some of my best friends are artists. Some of my happiest memories have come from going to art shows and the people I've met. And um, so, sometimes the rejections can get you down. I remember there was one time I had 40 rejections in 2 months, and I thought, oh
Mm.
my gosh, how do I keep going with this? Why do I keep going? But you keep going. And
Yeah.
then you look back in the grand scheme of things, and I'm like, but I've met some wonderful people. So, plus I'm allowed to validate caregivers, I hope, in my own small way. So,
Okay. Yeah, you
mhm.
definitely are. You definitely are. I saw this quote from John F. Kennedy. Art is
Mhm.
not freedom from discipline, but discipline freedom. Do you
Mhm.
agree with that, and why?
I do. I think there's a part of art that is work. I mean, I made it sound pretty glorified when I talked about all the friends I had made, but you have to sit down and make the effort. You can't just sit around watching TV or having Netflix on. You've got to put the time in. So there is a discipline that's required. But I think as you get into it, you get lost, and that's the beauty of it, and that's the joy of it. So it's kind of an ebb and a flow between the two, for me
Okay.
anyway.
Beautiful. Well, as we end on today, you have any encouraging word from my listeners on today? I know you mentioned you were hoping some of your students would be watching, whether it's them or someone else you can encourage on today before we end.
I would just stay true to yourself. I mean, I'm not doing anything that's trendy. I wish this topic of caregiving was in the news more. It's heartbreaking to me that it's not, but you have to just be true to yourself. And if you are, the joy will be there. So,
Yeah. Okay. Be true to yourself. That's simple
yeah.
and straight to the point. I love it. Absolutely love it. And they can find you on Instagram. Is that right?
Yes, I post more on Instagram. So
Okay.
it's Mary.Porterfield. And my website is maryporterfield.com. And I post less frequently on Facebook. But if you're on Facebook, you can look back on some of the photos I've taken from shows and see some of my friends and other things. So,
Okay, okay. So, guys, you can reach out to her on Instagram, Mary Porterfield. That's her
mhm.
handle there. Or you can, her website, is that right? Is
Yep,
your,
maryporterfield.com.
okay. All right. I am typing that into the comments section so that individuals can be able to reach out to you, whether they're looking now or they come back later and are able to connect with you. We want them to be able to connect with you. And it's down at the bottom of the screen, guys.
Thank
IG,
you.
Mary.Porterfield, and her website is her name, maryporterfield.com. All right. And this has been tremendous. You guys over on Instagram, thank you all so much for watching, tuning in, hopping in for us. I appreciate you, those of you that are on YouTube and Facebook, for joining us on today. Again, this has been an episode, a session where we talk to real live portraitist, an artist, Mary Porterfield, and she has come in and she just wowed us on today with all that she is doing. And make sure, again, you follow her so you can see her, what's new and next for her, the next events that she'll be displayed, her work will be displayed, and you can continue to follow her. I know I have since we met. So this is great. Thank you again for your time on today. I'm so glad again that we finally connected and we were able to have you on. I bid you Godspeed, and I'm grateful that you are able to do what you're doing for your mom and all caregivers. So thanks again.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Annette. I think you're such a talented writer, but even more so, you're just a beautiful soul. And I really want to thank you for having me today and acknowledging this topic and honoring my work. It's truly been a true joy for me to be with you. So thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you for coming with us and accepting the time
Oh,
to
of
come with us
course,
on
of
today.
course.
All right, guys, as she's exiting, Mary, don't go anywhere, okay?
Okay.
I'm going to place her back in the virtual waiting room because we want to play the promo for next week and also for later this evening. But guys, again, thank you all so much for joining me on today, for your time, for watching, for your comments and engaging with us on today. this is the first part of today's 2-for-1. I will have another segment at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time on tonight, and I'm going to feature, as we said, arts and books on today. Arts and books. Arts was the afternoon session, and books will be the evening session. Although there's still a connection with art a little bit later on today. So guys, don't miss it, okay? Don't miss it. And again, please make sure you support my friend. I still have her information on Instagram, Mary.Porterfield, or her website, maryporterfield.com. All right, guys. So we will see you. And if I did call your name on today, charge it to my head, not my heart. I do appreciate all of you all coming in and supporting us on today. And for those that liked and shared, thank you so much. And for engaging, and those that will come a little bit later to watch. All right. I'll see you at 5:30. So that's about 4.5 hours, right? I'll see you guys a little bit later, right? Don't y'all disappoint me. We'll see you next time. On the next session of Get Caught in a Net.
Caught in a net with